Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the Pokémon Film Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 20th animated film to be released as part of the Pokémon franchise, Volcanion and the Mechanical Marvel. Once again, I have no prior history with this movie prior to getting it on DVD. When I first watched it, I thought it was pretty damn good, but it's been a while since I've seen it again, so does it still hold up? Well, let's talk about it and find out. So, long-ass plot summary time. And the film begins once, as you do with these Pokémon films, with the standard opening prologue. In this case, we actually open up with our titular Volcanion as he's attacking an airship. And yes, Volcanion is a Pokemon, if you couldn't tell by the name. This is Volcanion, and as you can probably guess by the name, he's a very explosive Pokemon, as he has a ring on his back that he can kind of break in two, and basically shoots out various explosive blasts. Steam, fire, energy, basically it's just various things that he did. It's just basically various things. And, well, he's using his steam, and basically how he's flying is that he's using the steam basically like a jetpack or whatever to just kind of fly himself into the air and land on the airship. And upon arriving on the airship, the crew in charge of it immediately go on the offensive as they confront Volcanion outside, and they end up pulling out their Pokemon. And it's here we see that this crew has something strange about it, as when they bring out their Pokemon, they Mega Evolve their Pokemon. Now, as I stated in previous videos, in order for a Pokemon to Mega Evolve, they need a Mega Stone. Well, this movie also states that apparently trainers can also have their Pokemon Mega Evolve through something called a Kinstone. It's like a Mega Stone, but whereas a Mega Stone just simply can make a Pokemon Mega Evolve, a Kinstone is supposed to be something that is specially wielded by humans and is meant to symbolize the bond between them and their Pokemon. And so, through the Kinstone and that bond, they're able to make their Pokemon, they're able to actually have their Pokemon Mega Evolve. However, for whatever reason, these Kinstones look a little different, as they're darker, more malevolent, and when these pirates, I'm just going to call them, end up activating their Kinstones and cause their Pokemon to Mega Evolve, it looks like it's not a very friendly process, as when the Pokemon Mega Evolve, they are clearly in pain, and when they do Mega Evolve, their eyes are not glazed over, but glowing, making it look like they're not exactly aware of themselves or what they're doing. Regardless, though, the Mega Evolved Pokemon end up attacking Volcanion, and while he tries his best to fend them off, it doesn't really go well. However, in the midst of the battle, the pirates end up throwing a mechanical ring that latches onto Volcanion's leg, and when they try throwing a secondary ring, well, Volcanion manages to grab it, so that kind of fails. But unfortunately, the Pokemon end up shooting a freeze attack right at Volcanion, which frees the majority of his body, and, well, he ends up getting thrown off the airship, and, well, the pirates basically think they're home free as they make a run for it. In the meantime, though, this is when we cut to Ash and Co. As we see that they set up camp near a lake, and, well, the film begins with a standard Pokemon battle with a theme song accompanying over it. In this case, it's Ash versus Clement, as they're just getting some practice in, throwing their Pokemon at each other and just trying to get them up to, and trying to make sure their fighting prowess doesn't get rusty. However, in the midst of this battle, Volcanion literally crashes onto the scene as he just bucking craters right there on the battlefield, and when he does, well, the other ring that he held onto, it ends up latching onto Ash. And as such, as everyone's getting their wits about them and wondering what the heck's going on, Volcanion ends up becoming visible as the smoke from his crash ends up subsiding. However, as everyone's looking at him, Volcanion end up regaining his own senses as he starts moving and tries leaving. And it's here we see what those metal rings do. It turns out that these rings are basically like handcuffs, basically high-tech handcuffs. As the rings are basically linked, and if the rings end up getting a certain distance apart from each other, they end up activating an electromagnetic link that ends up just literally forcing the two rings together. In other words, Volcanion and Ash are now stuck together, much to Volcanion's chagrin, as for one thing, we learn he can talk through the power of telepathy, and another thing, we see when he sees that he's stuck with Ash, he gets annoyed. And of course, while the group is amazed at Volcanion's presence and that he can talk, well, once they learn about the connection with the rings, Volcanion's just annoyed, but he doesn't really have time to think about that right now, as he wants to get back to that airship because there's something in there that he wants to get back. And as such, with Ash as his unwilling passenger, both for the rider and the Pokemon, they end up flying off to try and go after the airship. In the meantime, though, we do cut back to the airship as we see the airship land in a kingdom whose name I am currently actually no, I do remember it. It's the Azov Kingdom. And to greet the airship, we see one of the ruling heads of the Azov Kingdom, a young prince by the name of Ryleth. Hold on, let me check. Yes, his name was Raleigh, well, you can clearly tell that he doesn't have a violent bone in his body, as he's very excited to meet the pirates and wants to see their cargo. Well, his attendant is, as walking alongside him, is this very obviously sinister-looking man that we later learn is named Alva, and he's carrying a staff with a Mega Evolution symbol on it, and like I said, this guy just screams, "I'm an evil douchebag." His hair color, his design, his goggles. This guy could pretty much have the words, "I'm this movie's villain" tattooed on his forehead. Regardless, either way, the prince is actually more than happy to see the pirates, and well, we soon see what the pirates are transporting that Volcanion wanted to get his hands on: a Pokémon. Specifically, a mechanical Pokemon by the name of Magearna. And when I say Magearna is a mechanical Pokemon, I don't mean it in the sense of her whole gimmick is that she's a Pokemon that looks like a machine, or it's modeled after gears like other Pokemon. No. Magearna is actually an artificially created Pokemon, and she was actually created in the Azov Kingdom 5 years prior by an inventor by the name of Nikola. Yes, I get it. Nikola Tesla, Azov, Asimov. They have puns like that all over the place. Point is, though, 500 years prior, the Azov Kingdom was Magearna's home, and her primary purpose was to act as the companion to the princess of the time. Help her out, play with her, and when necessary, defend her. However, for whatever reason, Magearna wound up disappearing from the kingdom. Now, the prince states that Magearna wound up vanishing in the midst of a war, but we don't really learn all the details surrounding this. Point is, though, for 500 years, Magearna has been absent. And, well, the prince thinks that Magearna's presence here is a good thing because it's supposed to help the kingdom in the long run. However, in the midst of him just fanboying over Magearna, that's when Volcanion shows up with Ash lashed onto his leg, and once more, Volcanion wants to get Magearna right now, just wants to grab Magearna and run. However, once again, the pirates end up turning their Pokemon on Volcanion and even manage to freeze him again. And so when the prince sees Ash, he thinks that all he has to do is just explain the situation to Ash, and maybe Volcanion will listen. After all, he doesn't really mean Magearna any harm. It's for the good of the kingdom and all that crap. However, as he's talking, Volcanion does manage to thaw himself out from the ice, and he ends up throwing up a massive steam cloud. And when he does this, he actually manages to propel Ash right into Magearna, and well, thanks to the tether, well, Ash is not only pulled back, but he was holding on to Magearna when he was pulled back, so hey, Volcanion just got Magearna out of there, and as such, they make a run for it. However, and thankfully they do end up getting some more help, as who should show up but Ash's Pokemon, as the flyers are flying in to offer aid, and the Pokemon that couldn't fly are riding on the flyer's back. So hey, that's at least some extra help. And on top of that, we even check in with Ash's friends, as after Volcanion ran away with Ash riding on his leg, they chased after to try and help Ash, and so they're walking around the Azov Kingdom as well. Either way, regardless, Ash and Volcanion do manage to get away, though once the smoke clears, we see that the prince's entourage is a few members more now. Because, well, while Volcanion was flying around with Ash holding on to him before, well, whose meal should he have disturbed but Team Rocket's? As they were at a random restaurant just kind of planning to stuff their faces in, but once they saw Ash riding on Volcanion, especially since, like I said, he ruined their meal, they wanted to check out what was going on, and so they tried sneaking into the castle while all this was going on, and, well, everyone caught them. I'm not even kidding. They arrived in the most obvious place, as they shot a zip line or something to the landing pad where the giant hold on one second. What did I say it was? Airship. I just said the word only a few minutes ago. How could I forget it? Anyway, regardless, they arrive at the landing pad where the airship landed, and well, as the smoke clears, everyone sees them crawling up. However, Alva actually sees this as a golden opportunity, as they bring Team Rocket in for questioning, and Team Rocket reveals that they know Ash, and so Alva thinks that maybe Team Rocket might be a little useful to them, so he recruits them to their side. In the meantime, though, back with Ash, Volcanion, and Magearna, we do kind of see a bit more about what Volcanion's personality, as while Ash's Pokemon do come to meet up with Volcanion, well, he doesn't really have a kind word for any of them, save Magearna, because you see, Volcanion does not like humans, like at all. He does not like that Ash is here. He doesn't want to trust him, and he likes Ash's Pokemon even less because his distrust towards humans is so great that he actually dislikes any Pokemon that would dare ally themselves with humans. Here you go. He thinks Ash and his Pokemon are the enemies, to the point where even when Ash tries cozying up to Magearna, he actually gets outraged if Ash even tries touching Magearna, even if Magearna is the one that engages first. But the point is, Volcanion is kind of a crusty bastard and does not want, and basically just wants Ash to GTFO as quickly as possible. And the only reason that Ash can't heed that demand is because of the ring currently strapped around his waist. Ultimately, this is when Ash's friends catch up with the group and they learn about this, and it's also here where we see one of Volcanion's weaknesses. As at one point he does try blasting Ash, but it turns out that all of his explosive powers, they're powered by water, and unfortunately he does have a finite supply. So once he runs out of water, if he wants to keep doing all that flashy shit he does before, then he needs to get a good supply. Thankfully, where they are right now is under a bridge, and there is a little river flowing right near them, so Volcanion's able to fill up rather quickly. But at this point, the group has to run. And Volcanion does not want Ash and his friends coming along, but, well, for one thing, he's stuck with Ash, so he has to bring him wherever they go, and, well, Ash's friends are not going to leave their friends, so they're following with. As such, while Volcanion is against having them here, he really has no choice, especially when Magearna starts getting on his case. And yeah, I want to make this right clear right now, Magearna can't talk. The most that we hear from her is basically just some kind of, it's just weird, these weird click sounds that she sort of makes. I don't know if, I don't really know if clicks is the right word. It goes, it's like a beeping or clicking or whatever. It's just mechanical noises, but that's how she communicates. And it's basically just her version of Pokemon speech, because Volcanion can clearly understand her, but it's just not what you were used to. Regardless, though, either way, getting back on topic, Volcanion had to realize that he has to leave the city, and Ash and Co. are coming with him, regardless of what he wants to happen. As such, the group does end up leaving, and going back to Alva, he actually is trying to keep an eye on Volcanion because, well, he wants Magearna. But and as such, he does realize that, and as such, as the merry band of morons that are his pirates end up tracking Volcanion's whereabouts, they realize that he's going towards a plateau called, hold on one second again. It's called the Navel Plateau. And as such, Alva takes advantage of his newly formed partnership with Team Rocket and orders them to go to the Navel Plateau to investigate. And as such, Team Rocket, of course, are happy to go along. But in the meantime, we cut back to Ash and Co. as they managed to travel far enough that they managed to set up camp for the night. There is some more character stuff between there and this, but otherwise it's not really important for the plot, but it is good for character stuff. And to try and help Ash out, because, well, if he's strapped to Volcanion, he'll be at the epicenter of a lot of action. Because, well, Clement actually ends up creating a suit for Ash, which is supposed to defend him from just about anything, although it's not water resistant, as we see later. Point is, though, with the suit on, Ash should be protected from anything that goes wrong. And yes, I should probably mention this, Ash is able to change clothes despite the fact that the ring is still firmly stuck around his waist. And I do find that weird. I can probably hand wave it because it's a cartoon and you can easily just look over that. But again, he changes clothes at various points throughout this movie, and yet the ring is always on the outside. It's never under his clothes. It's always above them, even for this suit. It's weird. That implies that he can just slip stuff in underneath it. So I guess it's not as tight as everyone thinks it is, and yet it's somehow stuck around his waist. I don't know. I'm reading too much into this. Regardless, everyone ends up camping out for the night, but that's when Team Rocket arrives on the scene. And the thing is, when Team Rocket found Ash and Co., while they were aware that their orders were just to survey and watch, well, technically they don't work for Alva. They work for the Prince. And since the Prince wants Magearna, they just decide, fuck it, let's just grab Magearna. And so, in their typical Team Rocket fashion, they end up attacking the group while they're sleeping. And we see that the Pokemon they have are not their regular Pokemon. It's a Heracross and a Slicer, yes. And they end up showing off the kinstones that Alva made. And so, as such, they end up forcing their Pokemon to Mega Evolve, with Ash and Co. actually being disgusted by it, since Kinstones are supposed to Mega Evolve Pokemon based on the bond that Pokemon have with their trainers. But Team Rocket just sort of laughs it off as they sick their Pokemon on the group. Ultimately, Ash, Volcanion, and Pikachu are the only ones that deal with Team Rocket's rogue Pokemon, as the rest of the group takes Magearna and just makes a run for it. And thankfully, Volcanion is able to take care of the Pokemon, as he does show a fraction of his power, as he causes an explosion that literally craters the area. Though he tells Ash that if he wanted to go all out, he could take out a mountain. In the meantime, though, back with the rest of the group, they do manage to get far enough away, but they end up falling into a pit that Team Rocket dug up. However, before Team Rocket can capitalize on this and grab Magearna, help arrives in the form of another member of the royal family, a princess named Camilla. And Camilla does show off that she's actually one of the good guys, as she pulls out her own kinstone that is not created by Alva, and actually uses it to actually willfully evolve her Gardevoir into its Mega Evolve form, who in turn sends Team Rocket flying. As such, Ash and Volcanion do meet up with the rest of the group, and she basically offers them a ride on her own little airship. And it's here where we do get a bit more of an explanation about what's going on with Alva, and subsequently why Prince Raleigh is siding with him, despite the fact that he is obviously evil. You see, it turns out that Raleigh actually idolized Nicola. Now, the thing is, something I haven't talked about with Nicola was that in the grand scheme of the kingdom, he was very much a leading mind, as he specialized in creating technology that could basically mimic the abilities of Pokémon. And he used this technology to help better the Azov Kingdom, with Magearna being his crown achievement. And Raleigh just utterly looks up to that, as he wants to basically mimic Nicola's talent, and has even studied his blueprints to the point where he's tried recreating a lot of his stuff. The only problem is he hasn't quite reached there yet, which is where Alva comes in. You see, Nicola's specialty was in arcane science, something that Alva is also studying. And as such, the prince basically latches onto Alva, and Alva in turn used this admiration to pretty much get close to the prince. And the thing is, while nobody's doing anything to stop Alva from getting close to the prince, everybody is fully aware that this guy probably has ulterior motives, as he acts all friendly and nice and everything. But like I said, this dude is very clearly evil. Like, one of his inventions is because the thing is, those kinstones that force Pokemon to Mega Evolve are his creation. And we even going back to the scene where Volcanion confronted Alva and his cohorts outside the airship, he actually used his staff to Mega Evolve his and his cohorts' Pokemon. So clearly, those are his design. And like I said, his force Mega Evolutions are not built on bonds, and they clearly when the Pokemon Mega Evolve, it's an unwilling transformation. So yeah, this guy is clearly evil, but Raleigh's a stupid kid, and he only sees the scientist, not the man. So he still looks up to this asshole, despite the fact that he is very much just evil for evil's sake. As such, the princess is fully aware that her brother is being taken advantage of, but she can't really do anything to stop it either, because despite the fact that their father, who is the king of this place, who we never actually see in the movie, is fully aware that Alva might be plotting something. Like I said, he's the only one in the kingdom that's been studying arcane science, so everybody does kind of tolerate him and does basically pick his brain whenever they need to. But either way, whatever he wants Magearna for, it's clearly not for anything good, so the princess is more than willing to help out. As such, the group eventually does make their way to the plateau, and well, once the group arrives, they do end up finding the entire plateau is just filled with Pokémon. However, none of the Pokémon actually seem to be trusting towards any of the trainers. And, well, that's because, as we learn later, all these Pokemon were abused. In fact, one of the first things the group sees upon getting close to the valley is that they see a Pokemon that's clearly been hurt and caught in a net and is being chased by a Pokemon hunter. And while everyone is able to chase the hunter off, well, this Pokemon does need some medical attention, and so once they bring it to the plateau, Serena, Bonnie, and even the princess do whatever they can to help it, which Volcanion isn't fully okay with, but he does let them do it because they clearly do have no ulterior motives. They just want to help. So it's nice, but yeah, this one nice act does not convince any of the Pokemon of the plateau that these trainers are on the up and up. They don't like humans. They never do. They don't plan to like humans, and ask us to try and ingratiate themselves a little. Ash and his friends all bring their Pokemon out, and basically the plateau Pokemon and their Pokemon just start getting chummy and friendly, and it's nice. I like it. It's some nice stuff, just seeing all the Pokemon get nice with all be friendly with one another. And meanwhile, Volcanion, to try and rest his own wounds, because he did get hurt while they were fighting the hunter, ends up going up to his little hidey hole, which is in a cave overlooking the plateau, as we see that he does have a little bath area that he likes to just cool off in, help himself out, even recharge. And this is also where Ash loses the suit, because like I said, it's not waterproof, and the suit absorbs all the water it can before it explodes. It's nice. I kind of love it. From here though, everyone's just making nice. All the ladies are just doing whatever they can to try and make treats for all the Pokemon, while Clement is doing whatever he can to try and figure out how to free Ash and Volcanion. And as such, we actually do see some genuinely nice moments. We actually do get some more good character stuff as Ash and Volcanion do end up talking. And again, once again, this is where we learn that all the Pokemon in this valley were abused. With Volcanion even, I'm not going to say confirming, but slightly hinting that part of the reason he doesn't trust humans is because, like the Pokemon at the plateau, he was taken advantage of by a human. Ash does inquire about it, even asks if he was hurt in a similar way, but Volcanion intentionally shies away from the topic because he doesn't want to talk about it. And it's actually a pretty nice scene, and I'll get into why I like it as we get more into into Volcanion's character, but it's a nice way of trying to establish a bond between these two. And as such, eventually a way is found to separate Ash and Volcanion. There is a Pokemon whose name I'm going to look up right now because I did write it down. Gulpin, its name is Gulpin, who can basically shoot out, I'm just going to call it acid spit, as it can shoot it at the latches, which will not break it apart, but make them brittle enough that they can be cut through with a metal slicer. As such, with Gulpin's help, Clement is able to free Volcanion and Ash from their bonds, and Ash tries thanking Gulpin by giving it a hug, but it reacts negatively and runs away. And at first, Volcanion does tell Ash and Co to hit the road, but nobody's really doing it. And while he does threaten to blow them away if they don't leave, it's a bluff. It's just very much a bluff. As when Ash looks at him and doesn't flinch, he just kind of says he's going to go take a nap. As such, the rest of the group ends up going back down to the plateau and does continue getting chummy with the Pokemon. And with even Ash coming back up with a plate of food that were made and presenting it to Volcanion, the Gulpin, or the Gulp... sorry, I forgot it just as quickly as I said it. Gulpin, sorry. And another Pokemon that looks like a candle. Again, I don't know every Pokemon's name. And ultimately Volcanion does encourage these two Pokemon to eat the fruit and all that, but he does continue further explaining more about why he doesn't want to trust humans, because all of them have a bad history with humans. With Volcanion explaining more of Gulpin's history. Apparently, the reason why Gulpin reacted so negatively to Ash wasn't just because it was abused by humans, it's that it was abandoned by its trainer. And Volcanion doesn't really know all the details about Gulpin's relationship with its trainer, but there is one detail that he does know. Apparently, one of the last things that Gulpin's trainer did before they abandoned Gulpin was give it a hug. So yeah, physical affection is not really something Gulpin wants to do. And almost every other Pokemon on the plateau has a story like that, something or even worse in some regards. Every Pokemon here comes to the plateau for safety, for calm. And it's why Volcanion can't trust humans. Because this place is supposed to be a safe haven for Pokemon, and any humans that typically come by here do not mean well, as evidenced by the hunter that we saw earlier. So these Pokemon all came here because they don't have anywhere else to go. So while Volcanion is thankful for Ash and Co for helping him, as if it wasn't for Ash and Co he wouldn't have gotten Magearna back, at the same time, he does want them to leave the plateau. Not because, like, again, it's not because he hates them right now. In fact, as the journey has gone along, Volcanion has grown closer to Ash and Co. But at the same time, he doesn't feel like their presence is going to help anything. As such, he does make it clear he's thankful for everything that Ash and Co. are doing. He does say that he thinks that they should leave as soon as possible. Unfortunately, though, before Ash and Co. can heed this order, well, that's when Alva and his forces arrive as their airship ends up descending on the plateau, and they basically just throw up a giant black smoke cloud, which ends up covering the entire plateau, spurring Ash, Volcanion, and the rest of the group into action as they all run down to see what the matter is. Unfortunately, things go from bad to worse as Alva's flunkies come out, and they end up sicking not only their Pokemon on the plateau, but they also send out these weird electric links or chains or whatever that end up grabbing some of the trainer Pokemon and actually create a cage around some of the plateau Pokemon. And so, while Serena ends up ordering her Fennekin to unleash and another Pokemon to unleash an attack on these things, all it really does is create an energy burst that hurts the Pokemon they're holding onto, as well as the Pokemon they're trapping. As such, Ash and Volcanion arrive to try and help out, but they end up getting trapped themselves as one of the bad guys' Pokemon ends up throwing up an electric cage around them that shocks both Volcanion and Ash, and to further ensure that the pair won't get out of the cage, one of the flunkies' resident Steelix ends up shooting out various rocks that will explode if you touch them. So, yeah, basically Ash and Volcanion are stuck. As from here, though, this is when the flunkies make their demands, as they tell Magearna that if she wants all this to end, if she wants the Pokemon to be free, and if she doesn't want Volcanion and Ash to suffer, then she needs to come with them. And Magearna clearly is conflicted by this, but does comply as she does willingly go with them. And true to their word, they do let the Pokemon go, though Ash and Volcanion take some time to get out of there because their electric cage doesn't go away. But as Magearna is brought up into the airship, once more the princess ends up calling out her brother as she doesn't know why the hell he's going along with Alva. But the prince assures his sister that everything's fine. This is all for the good of the Azov kingdom, and that maybe he and Alva should tell the princess what their plan is, and she'll understand. And Alva agrees. It is time to make everything come to light. As he goes to Magearna and opens up her chest, and he pulls out a white orb that has a heart symbol on it. And this is something called the Soul Heart, and it's literally supposed to be the core of Magearna. As once it's taken out, her body goes limp, and she basically becomes, I'm just gonna say she's dead. She's just basically dead, much to even the prince's own shock, as, Alva makes it clear that he didn't give a shit about Magearna, he just needed the Soul Heart. As such, when the prince tries calling Alva out on this, well, he has his Gengar use Hypnosis on the prince and put him to sleep. As such, he throws Magearna's body back to the group, and then he has more of his flunky's Pokemon unleash Hyper Beam on the area because he doesn't want anyone following him. Thankfully, though, nobody is hurt because plenty of the Pokemon on the plateau threw up psychic shields to protect the group. But they're too little too late to stop Alva as Alva and Co. take their airship and fly back to the kingdom. As such, thankfully because of the Hyper Beam, Volcanion and Ash were freed from their chambers, but Volcanion is more concerned with Magearna as he runs to where Magearna's body is, and, well, he basically just carries it on his back. And it's here that everybody realizes they gotta get shit done right now. Whatever Alva wants the Soul Heart for, it's not going to be anything good, and Magearna needs it as a live. So Volcanion ends up filling himself up on water as everybody decides that they need to go and face him as soon as possible. And it's also here we do learn a bit more about how Magearna and Volcanion actually met, as apparently Magearna and Volcanion did actually meet around 500 years prior, meaning they're both very old Pokemon, and they actually met in a flower field on the outskirts of the plateau. And, well, from the instant that Magearna and Volcanion met each other, I don't really know how to describe their relationship. I don't know if I would call it romantic, but there's definitely a close bond between them, as evidenced by the fact that Volcanion even at one point said that he would walk through fire to save Magearna. And you can understand why, because when Magearna is one of the few people that could withstand his explosions, since she was a mechanical Pokemon, especially since she could actually condense into a ball form that, yes, is meant to look like a Pokeball. I actually kind of like that. And basically, for the 500 years she was at the plateau, she helped all the resident Pokemon. Just being motherly, helping them, healing them, singing for them, just being kind. But since Volcanion basically wants this plateau to be a safe haven for any Pokemon that have been spurned and hurt by humans, he more than welcomed Magearna, and he was happy for her presence, which is why he's very much more than determined to make sure that the asshat that did this to her will pay. In the as such, once Volcanion is all said and done, everybody, and Volcanion included, ends up getting onto the princess's airship and ends up chasing after Alva's airship. However, back on Alva's airship, well, it turns out that Team Rocket are having a few second thoughts about working for this guy, as at some point they managed to get back to Alva, don't know how, don't ask, they didn't show. But it turns out that Meowth can sense Magearna's heart, as while the soul heart may have been taken out of her body, everything that is Magearna is still inside. And Meowth can sense that Magearna is hurting. Don't ask me how. I guess you could argue that the same way he's been able to sense Magearna's heart is the same way he's able to understand Pokemon despite being able to talk. But yeah, he realizes Magearna is still in pain, and Team Rocket realizes maybe we don't want to work for this guy, as they decide to do a heel face turn and pretty much just jump Alva with the intent of grabbing the soul heart. Alva fully expected them to do this, and he has his Gengar basically throw them out the door, with the only one sticking behind being Meowth. Why? I really have no fucking idea. Maybe he just wanted insurance. Maybe it's because he's a talking Meowth. Maybe it's for shits and giggles. I really don't know. This guy's evil for the sake of evil. So maybe he just did it because he wanted someone to gloat at. I really don't know. Point is, though, he does take the airship back to the king. He does take the airship back to the kingdom of Azov, and well, it's also here we learn what his evil plan is, as we actually get like a side-by-side back exposition dump, as one side we cut to Alva as he actually reaches the kingdom, and on the other side we have the princess as she, Ash's group, and Volcanion are getting called by her, I'm just gonna say, personal assistant, who had managed to find one of I'm trying to think of his name. One of Nicola's old blueprints. And it turns out the reason why Alva's going through all this is for one of Nicola's greatest inventions. Basically, surrounding the kingdom of Azov is a giant wall, which is supposed to do what walls are supposed to do, keep the kingdom safe. But it turns out there's a portion of this wall that's not a wall. Rather, it's actually a flying fortress, and when activated, it's supposed to be able to defend the kingdom from any threat, as it contains a massive firepower that can pretty much annihilate anything that gets in its way. And unfortunately, though, a lot of people wanted this. Basically, 500 years prior, when Nicola created this device, it wound up breaking out into a war where everybody fought over it. Everybody wanted this thing for themselves, and a lot of people got hurt and or died. And it's in the midst of this chaos that Magearna actually was lost, because you see, the reason why Alva wanted Magearna? Her soul heart is the power source. Like I said, one of Magearna's functions was that she was supposed to defend the princess whenever the need arose. And so it's utilizing that function of Magearna's programming that causes this fortress to become the weapon it is. As its primary purpose is to defend the kingdom, so, well, obviously Magearna can push that. However, once Nicola realizes that he pretty much fucked up by creating this thing, he told Magearna that she had to run, because if anyone got their hands on her soul heart, they'd be able to make this fortress move again, and that would be it for everybody. Hence why Magearna fled and eventually wound up at the plateau, where she eventually met Volcanion. And yeah, it's this weapon that, Alva's full intent is pretty much to reactivate this thing. As for whatever reason, he states being, he wants to fix the kingdom, save the kingdom for his own purposes, of course. Reshape it to his own will, blah 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 blah. I'm just gonna say right now, this guy is evil for the sake of evil. What you think would be a problem, but no, I'm kind of eating it up, and I'll get to why later. Point is, though, Alva does get to the central control of this fortress, and he does put Magearna's soul heart right in the center of it, and sure enough, it does power up the fortress and cause it to start flying away. As such, Alva fully intends on testing the fortress's capabilities on the princess as he sees her airship getting closer, but thankfully, thanks to the bit of Magearna's will that's still in her soul heart, basically, she jams up the weapon before it can open fire, meaning that Alva can't do shit to stop Ash and Co from getting closer. And as such, basically, Ash and Co end up unleashing all their flying Pokemon, with of course a few of their other Pokemon flying on board it, and Ramir, Alva's flunkies unleash many of their other Pokemon using their Kinstones to force them to all to Mega Evolve, and it's here we get to, honestly, a really kick-ass battle, as we see all the Pokemon just doing whatever they can to just whoop ass and take names. Eventually Princess's airship lands down, and the remaining Pokemon come running out. Volcanion comes crashing in, just kicking everybody's ass. It's just a fun time. Can't do it justice. Just go watch the movie yourself. It's very much fun. It's very much a fun fight scene. But however, something I also forgot to mention, Team Rocket did hitch a ride, as after they got kicked off the airship, they did end up crashing into some trees, and when they saw Ash and Co riding on the Princess's airship, they shot a grappling gun and were basically just hanging on for dear life to try and basically catch up with them. And sure enough, when Ash and Co arrived to the fortress, so did Team Rocket, because, well, they want to get Meowth back. Either way, Ash, Volcanion, and the princess do end up making their way into the fortress, and sure enough, they end up right there in the control room where Alva is. But he's prepared for them, as he ends up trapping them in more of those electric chains or whatever. And basically, he makes it clear that he's just gonna fuck them all up. He ends up turning the fortress right towards the plateau with every intent on blowing it up. Why? Again, for the evils. This guy is just a prick. However, while he does try fire, as such, he tries activating it, but once again, Magearna tries resisting him. But, unfortunately, he has his Gengar use enough of its own psychic powers on Magearna that, unfortunately, she does open fire. Thankfully, she's able to exert enough will that the blast misses the plateau, but she does end up nuking the bed of flowers that she and Volcanion met in. And, well, this act is enough to kind of break her heart, which Meowth confirms as he just breaks down crying because he can't hear Magearna's voice anymore. As such, sorry, I keep getting his name mixed up. Alva thinks this is a golden opportunity because, hey, Magearna's will has been broken. That means he can use her heart. That means he can use her power source for whatever the hell he wants. And so he does get the fortress prepped once again to open fire on the plateau. And he fails bad, as the Pokemon on the plateau end up using their power to try and fight back, as the Pokemon with energy abilities create a shield to block the laser, and the Pokemon that can all shoot Hyper Beam or some kind of other laser attack end up shooting back as well. And we even get a bit of help from one of the group's Pokemon, as Bonnie has a little Pokemon called a Squishy that can apparently absorb energy from the forest to make itself transform into a variety of different very powerful forms, as it's small and adorable in its base form, but it can turn into a dog-like attack Pokemon in one form, and then likewise turns into an even larger and giant warrior Pokemon to help the Pokemon of the plateau. And basically the combined firepower manages to send the laser back right at the fortress. And Alva basically is like, what the hell? This is not what's supposed to happen. And Volcanion basically just tells him the rough equivalent of screw you, we are not worthless like you think we are, as he manages to break through his chains, which simultaneously frees everybody else. And Ashton, of course, takes this opportunity to jump up to the platform that Alva's on, and he does manage to grab Alva's staff and then jam it right into the power source where Magearna's soul heart is, which in turn basically causes it to break down and thus renders the attack portion of this fortress completely and utterly useless. It's also here where the prince finally wakes up, thank God. But yeah, basically Alva has been beaten, and with his staff's destruction, all the kinstones that were connected to it basically just end up going dead, and all the Pokemon that were forced to Mega Evolve basically wake up, so to speak, and realize, hey, we're being used by assholes here. Maybe we don't want to do this anymore, as they all decide to flee. As such, it does look like the good guys won in the end. But Alva's a very sore loser, and so as the princess goes to comfort her brother, Alva ends up going to the controls of the fortress and he sets the fortress to crash right into the plateau. Because, like I said, this guy's a prick. And of course he's all laughing and being all smug about it. It's like, well, look, I guess I'll have to find another puppet to take advantage of. As he gets out a jetpack and plans to fly out of there, but it doesn't end up going well. As Volcanion, as Ash's Greninja manages to send an attack at him, which ends up getting not only through his defenses, but also ends up hitting his jetpack and causes him to go spiraling out of control and crash into the trees, where he basically is stuck for the rest of the movie until the credits prerequisite where are they now segment. Regardless, though, when the group realizes what Alva's done, they're kind of screwed. As unfortunately Alva locked the controls, so this fortress is going to land at the plateau. And unfortunately, the princess realizes that even if the group manages to escape the plateau, this thing is still going to crash, and it's going to take a lot of Pokemon out with it. So they need to figure out how to just take out the plateau take out this fortress before it hits the plateau. And the princess realizes that if they want to do that, then they need to blow this thing up from the inside. Something that Volcanion thinks he can do. The only problem is that in the midst of all the fighting, he ran out of water. However, part of the fortress does have is a steam room, and so they do have large water tanks. As such, Ash and the prince end up bringing Volcanion to the water tanks, and we do see the prince actually showing genuine regret for having trusted Alva, but Ash just kind of assures him that if he really wants to understand the world, that maybe he should go on his own Pokemon journey. Regardless, they are able to get Volcanion enough water, and the plan is for him to run to the outside of the fortress and then blow it up from the outside. As, like I said earlier, he has enough power to take out a mountain, so one blast from him should take out this entire fortress. However, as Ash, and the prince are making their way through the fortress, they end up finding themselves at the literal heart of the place. They see what looks like a giant energy generator in the center, and Volcanion thinks that if he caused an explosion here, it would take the entire fortress out with it. However, the prince actually dissuades Volcanion from doing this, because while that would take out the fortress, well, he wouldn't be able to get away himself, so he'd be screwing himself over. As such, he does say, you know what, you're right, let's stick to the original plan, as Ash, and the prince do manage to make their way to the outside of the fortress. As such, everybody ends up getting onto the princess's airship, including Magearna, because they did reintroduce her soul heart to her body, though unfortunately she's still not doing well. She's still broken, and while she can still move around, she's basically an empty shell at this point, so not doing so well. But regardless, they are able to get her on the airship as well, and so Volcanion does drop Ash and the prince off, and while the princess does get the airship clear enough so that it won't get caught in the explosion, Volcanion ends up shooting out a large steam blast right at the airship to get it further away from the castle, or get away from the fortress, as he actually jumps back in, and Ash realizes that Volcanion lied to them. As such, he ends up going to the center of the fortress, and, well, he does exactly what he said he wanted to do. He caused an explosion, with his last thoughts where everything goes boom, being that he's sorry that he couldn't protect Magearna. But ultimately, an explosion he does cause. As he creates an explosion so massive that it ends up completely destroying the fortress before it can even get close to the plateau, causing the chunks of debris and machinery to go falling to the ground below and landing in a lake. So it did look like that he'd saved the day. As such, unfortunately, though, it's sort of a hollow victory without him. Regardless, though, Ash and Co. do arrive back at the plateau, and they bring Magearna with them, but like I said, she's just a shell of her former self, and while the group tries assuring her that everything's fine, the plateau is safe, it's not enough. Magearna is still just out of it, and while they do get a slight reaction when they tell her that the plateau is safe, it's not quite there yet. However, her mood starts to brighten as they hear someone walking up. And this in turn does start to get Magearna moving again as she gets up and turns to the source of the sound and actually runs to it. And the source of the sound? It's Volcanion. Yep, he managed to survive, although he clearly took a bit of damage. As while he and Magearna do happily reunite, he does collapse and passes out. He's not dead, thankfully, as Magearna is able to wake him up by getting some flowers in his face, which he breathes in the pollen, and it causes him to sneeze and cause an explosion. But yeah, basically everyone's okay and everyone's happy and everything's fine. As such, everybody's happy for Volcanion. Everyone's all good. Everyone's all happy that he's safe. And while Volcanion does briefly remark about why the humans are all still here, well, at this point, it's made clear that he genuinely does like these people, and so he decides that if they're gonna stick around, if they're just gonna stick around anyway, he may as well make them honorary plateau Pokemon, which the group happily accepts this offer. And as such, Volcanion ends up having a war with Pikachu, as he's realizing that Ash very much is a handful, and he does tell Pikachu that he might need to take extra care of him. And as such, from there, the film ends as the princess gets everyone on board their airship. Everyone waves goodbye to the Pokemon of the plateau. Everybody gets back to the kingdom and has various fond moments with each other. Team Rocket snuck away in the chaos, so hey, they didn't face any repercussions because that's what they do. The prince decided to heed Ash's advice, as during the credits we do see him going off on his own Pokemon journey. And likewise, Alva did get his comeuppance, as the princess managed to find him as he was struggling to get out what was left of his jetpack. And so she plans to fly him back to the kingdom and on her airship. And while he attempts several times to jump off the airship, well, they wound up fitting in with one of the rings that Volcanion and Ash had earlier, so every time he tries going away, it just pulls him right back. So he's pretty much just screwed, so there you go. But yeah, that was Volcanion and the Mechanical Marvel. I think it's a really damn good movie. Yeah, I think it's a really damn good movie. In fact, if I can rank this I can rank this film in my pantheon of favorite Pokemon movies, I think this comes in 4th place. With the first one, of course, with first being Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, second place being the Power of the Unknown or Secret of the Unknown, I don't remember exactly, and the third one actually being a movie we'll be looking at later. But regardless, though, part of the reason why I think this movie is as good as it is because, well, Volcanion. The thing is, what I like about Volcanion is that they could have very easily written this guy to just be your standard fare jerk ass. Basically the guy who's just angry at everybody, but then gradually over the course of the film begins realizing he was wrong about about his biases. That maybe there are some good humans out there, and maybe he should turn his life around and be more open to people and blah 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 blah. But no, Volcanion's character is actually a lot more nuanced. He does have a xenophobia against humans, but it comes from a genuine place. Because, like I said, his whole gimmick is that the plateau that he's in charge of and lives in is supposed to be a safe haven for Pokemon who were taken advantage of and abused by humans. And, well, as an animal lover myself, I can actually understand why he would have the opinion he does. And on top of that, I love the implication with him that once upon a time he did trust humans. Again, they don't go into detail about it, as he intentionally just avoids talking about his past like that. But the implication is that once upon a time Volcanion was friends with humans, but then he was betrayed. Something happened that basically soured his opinion of humans to such a degree that he just wanted nothing to do with them. And as such, part of it, that kind of is what leads to his gruff exterior being a thing. Because something they showcase in the movie is that while he clearly does act angry and antagonistic to anyone he doesn't like, beneath all that stern and gruffness and anger, there is a genuine heart beating in there, and he does clearly care for all the Pokemon that live at the plateau. When Magearna was kidnapped by Alva and his forces, he was ready to go in guns blazing to get her back. When he arrives back at the plateau, we see a side of him that we didn't see on the outside of the plateau. A calmer side, a more friendly side, as he actually is patient with all the Pokemon at the plateau. And going back to the Pokemon that Ash & Co. helped him get away from the Pokemon Hunter, he was calm and friendly, and even told the Pokemon after he was healed up that it can rest here, that there's food here, and it's among friends. So clearly Volcanion does care for people, and it's just that he needs to keep up this strong exterior, because in his experience, well, even if he meets a good human, that doesn't mean that's guaranteed to stay that way. And going back to how the plateau is filled with abandoned and abused Pokemon, of course you would be cautious of anyone that comes here. These are all Pokemon. It's like going to an animal shelter and you find the one cat or dog that is had so many negative experiences with humans that it will actively attack you if you even get near it. And for something like that, it takes time for trust to be built. And ergo, that's what all the Pokemon of the plateau are. As once they see all the trainers, it takes time for them to start growing closer to them. It takes time for them to be trusting of them. And in some cases, it actually takes Volcanion vouching for Ash and his friends to get them to even give them something akin to a chance. And I find that very interesting, very unique, very nuanced. Because it makes sense that this would be a thing in the Pokemon world. Something that the Pokemon series likes to emphasize is just how connected everyone is with each other. About how Pokemon and humans are supposed to have this tightly knit bond with one another. How they're supposed to be super friendly, about how they all live in harmony with one another, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. But the thing is, we have seen in other Pokemon projects that there are people who would take advantage of Pokemon. There are criminal organizations whose main goal is to steal Pokemon. There are Pokemon hunters who will hunt Pokemon down and will, against their will, force Pokemon into a life of servitude. Not in the same way as trainers, as there's clearly supposed to be a mutual bond with trainers and their Pokemon, but no, just straight up kidnapping them and then selling them off to the highest bidder. Hell, the villain of the fourth Pokemon movie had created Pokeballs that had the express purpose of making Pokemon dark and evil. So clearly, there can be a lot of shady shit that goes on in the Pokemon world. But what I like about this is that this film kind of shows, like, the aftermath of that from the Pokemon's perspective. How would a Pokemon feel to be betrayed by someone that it trusted? Someone that was supposed to be its friend? Someone that was supposed to stick by them through thick and thin? Well, you get the plateau. And it's full of Pokemon that are not unfriendly, not unkind, but are clearly afraid. They've been hurt too many times, and so they're wary of humans. And it takes time for Ash and his friends to warm up to them, and I find that to be heartbreaking, but not in a bad way. Because when you actually do see the state of these Pokemon, it makes you actually understand more about why Volcanion has the biases he does. Because going back to how he probably was friends with humans once upon a time too. Well, considering the whole nature of this place, he can't afford to take chances. He can't afford to just let one human in because, hey, they might be one of the few good ones. Because once upon a time, all these Pokemon had a good human. Someone that they put their trust in, someone that they cared about. And that just led to them being hurt. So you understand why he puts the walls up. And yes, over the course of the film, he does grow to trust Ash and his friends. But it's a reluctant change. Even by the end, even by the third act of the movie, where it's clear that he does trust Ash and his friends enough to at least encourage the plateau Pokemon to give them something akin to a chance, well, even he thinks this is doomed for failure. He doesn't want the Pokemon to get too comfortable because, unfortunately, even shows of affection can dredge up dark memories, as we saw with the Gulpin when Ash tried giving it a hug and it reacted viscerally. Again, all these Pokemon probably do have at least one or two happy memories with the trainers that hurt them. So it's probably best not to reopen those old wounds. And I find that to be tragic. I find it to be tragic, but also heartwarming, because despite all the pain these Pokemon have gone through, there is a place that they can call home, and in turn it makes you more determined to see this place protected because you want these Pokemon to have a happy life. You want them to be safe, and in turn that's what gets you on Volcanion's side. And part of the whole idea of the movie is that neither side is truly right or wrong, but learns from each other. Volcanion, by the end of the movie, does not completely abandon his biases towards humans, because why would he? He's seen enough pain and hurt from humanity that of course he'd be cautious of us. But again, one of the things that I like about him is that despite this gruff exterior, there is a kind heart in there. When he and Magearna whenever Volcanion and Magearna share a scene together, they're like an old married couple, if I'm being honest. Like I said, while we can't understand Magearna, just their reactions, their body language, how Volcanion reacts to what Magearna says, it's clear that that between the two of them, Magearna's the kinder one and is usually the more open of the two. But at the same time, there is a sense of trust between them. And what I love is that he goes through heaven and hell just to keep Magearna safe, and it shows that he does have, and it shows that he is capable of caring. And as the film goes along, his tolerance of Ash and his friends does go up, as he goes from telling them to never touch Magearna to letting them all goof around with her when they all want to have fun. He goes from treating Ash and his friends with disdain to actually relying on them and giving them warning whenever something bad is going on. And then likewise again, by the time they all get to the plateau and Ash's friends end up healing the Pokemon they found, which I wrote the Pokemon's name down, but it was just one Pokemon. I'm not going to go back and check it. He's at first a little cautious about them healing the Pokemon. When it's clear they mean it no genuine harm, he lets it be, and so he does actually tolerate the group. And as such, by the end of by the time that he and Ash are freed from their manacles, it's clear that he has developed a sort of respect for the humans. He still is keeping them at arm's length. Because, like I said, it's implied that he did go through something similar to all these other Pokemon and was betrayed by a human that he cared for deeply. And again, combined with the fact that all these other Pokemon have gone through similar traumas, he does think it's still best that they don't get too close to them, because inevitably he thinks that them getting close to these humans will just lead them getting hurt again. So you can, again, it's understandable, and I love that as the film goes along, the gruffness just wears away more and more, and you do see the kind and caring soul beneath. He never lets up on the strength aspect. He's very caring, and he's very caring. But by the end of the film, you really do get a sense of Volcanion's personality, and you see that there are layers to him. He's not just a rough and gruff Pokemon who's there to try and be proven wrong. No, by the end of the film, if anything, is that his biases are affirmed in some regards, but by that same token, he allows himself to open up to other people, even though he has told himself for possibly hundreds of years that getting close to people was a bad idea. So for him to actually form a genuine friendship with Ash and his friends, it's nice. I like it. By the end of the film, you do think he's probably not going to be letting a lot of other humans come back to this place, because why would he? But at the very least, you do see that. At the very least, it is nice to see that despite how antagonistic it came across in the beginning when we met him, there is something kind there, and I do think it makes for a very interesting and nuanced character. Hell, honestly, as the film goes along, while he does still throw a few barbs at Ash and his friends just because they're humans, it really does not get annoying. If anything, I love the banter that he has with Ash and his friends, and when he and Ash are tethered together, it actually becomes a sort of slapstick routine. As at several points, he ends up blasting Ash back, and he knows that Ash is going to come flying back at him, so he just kind of repairs himself as he sends Ash flying, closes his eyes, lifts his leg, and when Ash comes back, he's like, ugh. It's just like he knows he's stuck with his kid, so he's just gonna. At best, he's just gonna screw with him however he can. He probably doesn't take a lot of amusement from it, but at the very least, it gets Ash to stop talking to him. So I don't know. I like that. So again. Volcanion I find to be a very nuanced character who I feel like could have been simplified and who I think could have been oversimplified, but I'm glad that they actually gave him depth I'm glad they actually gave depth to his character and did give reasons for his rough and tough behavior while still giving him a satisfying character arc with him growing closer to Ash and Co. Likewise, I also liked Magearna. Like I said, she doesn't talk throughout the movie, but I do like her as a supporting character, as she's clearly kind of like a motherly character, as the whole reason she was created was to be a friend, a cohort to the royalty of the Azov Kingdom. And we do see that throughout the film, she embodies that mindset. She is happy to help out wherever she can. And while she does stand by and watch a lot of the time, you can tell that there is a kind and caring soul in there, and you can tell that she does actually, and you can tell that she is a friendly sort, as she's the one that constantly has to tell Volcanion, hey, leave these kids alone. They're not doing anyone harm. And it's actually pretty nice. It's actually pretty sweet. And when you actually see her at the plateau, and Volcanion tells about how she cared for all the Pokemon there, you do really get a sense that she is an integral part of the plateau's, I guess, maintenance. As she is basically like a mother to all the Pokemon there, singing for them, caring for them. It's sweet and it's nice. And when she sacrifices herself for the sake of the Pokemon here and Volcanion, it is tragic. And what I love, and honestly, while we don't end up physically seeing her pain when her soul heart is taken and uses the power source for Alva's fortress, honestly, I actually do kind of like what we're shown there. As while it is a kind of an example of show don't tell, as Meowth is imparting to us what Magearna is feeling. Well, it's a great example. In my opinion, I think it's a good example of show and tell. As while Meowth is clearly telling us what Magearna is going through, well, he's clearly feeling what she's going through as well. He actually can feel her pain. You can actually hear it in Meowth's voice as he describes how things are going with Magearna. And knowing all the pain she's going through, seeing her physically try and resist Alva's will to protect her friends, it's sad. It's tragic. And by the end, when Alva manages to break her heart by making her think that she destroyed the plateau, it's tragic. It's sad. And it's sad. Even when she's brought back, she's a shell of her former self, quite literally. As she's barely talking, she barely reacts, and even Meow says that we still can't hear her in there. It's kind of dark, which in turn kind of makes the ending where she's reunited with Volcanion and she does get that luster back a lot more satisfying, because she may not get a sense of her character, but we do get a sense of who she is, which I get. You could argue character and who she is are the exact same thing in a movie, but in this regard, I think it works a lot better. So I like that. I do like that. And of course, that also brings me to another aspect of this film that I absolutely love: Alva. I do not know why I liked Alva as much as I did, because in every sense of the word, this guy is a cookie-cutter Saturday morning villain, and I gave other villains in the Pokemon films shit for just how generic they were. But for some reason, Alva's doing it for me as a villain, because I think the main reason why I like him in comparison to other one-note, two-dimensional villains is because this asshat seems to know he's a villain and just leans into it. This guy is completely unapologetic in what he's doing. He does not try to justify his terrible acts. He knows what he's doing is wrong, and he just goes all in on it. He steals, he kidnaps Magearna and Magearna and holds her hostage. He takes joy in using Pokemon and people for his own ends. When he basically just drops his act with the prince and makes it clear that he's planning to use Magearna's soul heart for the sake of powering the fortress, he doesn't even try to act all sorrowful about it. He's basically just like, yes, I got the soul heart. Now I'm going to use it for my own ends. And he's just like, and then likewise when he tries killing the princess, it's because he thinks, I don't need you anymore, so I'm going to destroy you because you're in my way. It's like, this guy is just evil for the sake of evil. The fact that he actually targets the plateau just because he wants to give the proverbial middle finger to Volcanion and Magearna, it's just like the icing on the cake. This guy is just an evil bastard for the sake of being an evil bastard. And I'm not gonna lie, that's what makes him kind of entertaining for me. This is a guy I really enjoy hating because he is so unapologetic in his actions. There is no twisted logic to what he's doing. He's not doing this because he wants to fulfill some quota or because he believes the world should be his. The closer we get to his motivation is that he thinks that the kingdom will thrive better if he's in control. But beyond that, this guy is an evil bastard because he wants to be an evil bastard. I genuinely like to believe that he wakes up every morning, looks in the mirror, and just tells himself, I am going to be the biggest prick the world has ever seen. And he just embraces it. And I kind of love it for that. And I kind of love him for that. This guy is just such an unabashedly unashamed bastard that it just makes him entertaining to watch. So, I don't know. He may be kind of a 2D villain, but I'm kind of okay with it. I like it. It's nice. Of course, there's the typical action that goes with any Pokemon movie, and I think that's awesome. I like seeing that go in motion. So that's all fun. But overall, I think why I like Volcanion the Mechanical Marvel is ultimately Well, Volcanion and his connection to the mechanical marvel. I like seeing, like I said, Volcanion's arc in this movie, I think it's a really good one, and his character is a very nuanced character with a lot of the layers to him. I do like how we see why he has the biases he does, and seeing him care for other Pokemon. And thus it does give you a better understanding of him, while also giving him a nice arc as he grows closer to Ash and Co. and does become open to trusting them. And it's nice. I like it. I like seeing it go forward. I like seeing his relationship with Magearna and how that grows. And I like seeing it. I like seeing her, and I like Magearna. I think she's pretty nice. The villain is a lot of fun. If I have to give any flaws in this movie, I guess you could argue that the stuff with the prince is annoying. Like, this kid is very much a sheltered child. Like, this guy, like, how could he not tell that this dipshit that has obvious villain written right all over him is not an obvious villain? He didn't even try to hide it. His sister could tell he was a villain, for God's sake. And I guess you could argue that the princess, I'm not going to call her a superfluous character. She just didn't really have much of an arc to her. She was a supporting character, a good supporting character at that. It's just that ultimately this is the Volcanion and Magearna show. So, I'm not going to call that a flaw, but I guess she could have, I don't know. I don't know. I'm guessing, you know what, forget it. That's not a flaw. She's just kind of she's just a good supporting character. Not really much is developed with her, unfortunately, but I think enough development is given towards the proper places that I'm willing to let it slide. So, ultimately, yeah, some other character. So yeah, maybe some of the other side characters could have gotten some development as well. I guess I consider that a flaw. But otherwise, the rest of the movie, I think it's just really damn good. Like I said, Volcanion, very nuanced character with a really great arc and good writing associated with him. Magearna, I think, is a nice character as well, and I do feel good for her by the end. Action, of course, is really kick-ass and fun. Alva is just a fun villain overall. Honestly, I think the only flaws are just that maybe some of the other side characters could have had more time to develop for them. Otherwise, I think Volcanion the Mechanical Marvel is just a really damn good movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. I think this is a great film to end the XY era of the anime on, and I think it's just a great time all around, so yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I'm Samuel Johnson, and, well, I hope you tune in next week because, well, while we end another era of the anime, or the anime movies anyway, well, the next era actually is not going to be part of the next few films are actually not going to be part of the next seasons of the anime. Yeah, after X and Y, the Sun and Moon seasons came out, but the next few movies actually have nothing to do with Sun and Moon. Rather, we actually go back to the beginning a bit. How so? Well, I hope you tune in next week as we take a look at Pokémon. I choose you.